Hello and welcome to NetApp Insight 2020, our first virtual conference. My name is Sandra Nicholson and I'm an SC with NetApp. I've also been with NetApp for 8 years. I'm really excited to be presenting today with one of my favorite customers from the University of Colorado, Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, IT Systems Architect, Alex Green. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Sandra.
I'm so glad that we're finally presenting together. Today, we're going to present how LASP saved money with auto tiering. And this is session number BRK 1044-2. So with that, I'm ready. Are you ready, Alex?
Yes, I'm ready, Sandra.
Well, let's get started. First, of course, we have to go through our confidentiality notice. And just a reminder to all who are viewing, this presentation contains confidential information and it should not be shared. Now that that's out of the way, let's move into what we're going to cover. Today, we're first going to go through a background of University of Colorado LASP. Alex is going to share with us some challenges they experienced. We'll then show the NetApp solution with our VAR peak resources. Alex is going to share why NetApp was selected, as well as savings and performance. We'll go over some future plans of LASP, and then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. Before we jump into the presentation, Alex, you presented and was featured in a great success video of NetApp a little while ago. And I've seen it, it's a great video, and I think it would be a great piece to show as an intro of the background of University of Colorado.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
With that, sounds good. So with that, we'll want you to watch this quick 2-minute video.
The Atlas V with Maven, looking for clues about the evolution of Mars through its atmosphere.
The Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, we're known as LASP. We're part of the University of Colorado, and so students are a big part of our mission here, and they're used in every facet of what we do. Once the students have gone through the programs or graduated, they go on to do amazing things. They work with many of our partners from NASA, Ball, Lockheed, local here in Colorado or all over the world. Here at LASP, we have over 130 scientists that are doing ongoing research over missions that impact everything from climate change to solar physics, and all of them have different varying data rates that we get off of the satellites, and that can be in the terabytes of data a month. And we take all that data in, ingest it, process it, and then publish it to the research community. The reason that we chose NetApp here at LASP was to have a common platform and a common backend for our infrastructure. We use a combination of NetApps for our different missions based on need. In our primary infrastructure cluster, we use a combination of NetApp A-Series and the storage grid to facilitate the auto tiering. We use the FabricPool to essentially set up that auto tier to where hot data lives in the flash, and our data that hasn't been accessed for a while tiers off to the storage grid. The NetApp FabricPool technology allows us to set up the auto tiering functions that have allowed us to save roughly 40 to 50% of our data that would live on SSD that now automatically tiers off to our storage grid S3 storage, and it just makes that a much more cost-effective use of that storage capacity. Since most of our researchers are on grant funding, we have to be very cost-effective, and the NetApps allow us to provide a centralized solution that is still very cost-effective.
Shortly, I'm sure soon we'll be able to meet in person again. The satellites are amazing, and what fascinates me the most are the missions, and I'm sure everyone else would like to hear more around the missions.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was a great experience having NetApp out, and just to kind of get a chance to tell our story as well as how we've used NetApp. LASP has over 20 active missions. We're one of the few organizations on the planet that has ever sent instruments to all 8 planets, including Pluto. That's a touchy subject with some people. We have
Yeah.
over 130 researchers that are all over the place, from climate science to planetary science, space physics. They're just doing amazing work. And again, this impacts all different aspects of our life, from space weather and how we has amazing impacts across the scope of everything. But a couple of them that we have to highlight here are the Maven and MMS. All of our different missions have some drastically different data requirements. They are just all over the board. Some of them are very, very low throughput because transmission from Mars, as within Maven's case, is a pretty slow pipe to get data off of. But still, by the time you've processed that data and expanded it multiple times over to do all the science processing, you can get into some tremendous, data storage needs. As well as we have MMS and other missions that are, here orbiting Earth, and they have much, much higher throughput, much, much more data. I mean, MMS has generated, 2-3 times as much data as we've collected during the entirety of LASP in the last 75 years. So
wow.
we just have wildly varying data needs, performance needs, and we're all over the map.
Wow, I'm sure that the missions are really exciting. When I was on campus and you guys were sharing a little bit about the missions, what I thought was so cool was how you guys really got together and actually watched when there would be a satellite actually pushed into space. I'm not sure if that's the correct word that you call it, but when it goes up into space, it's really cool. And with those unique data sets, it's really important to be able to handle that performance. And it was really great hearing about it. But I do have one question, because you touched on Pluto. Is Pluto really a planet now?
It's technically classified as a dwarf planet, but a lot of people on both sides will argue very strongly for it or against it.
Well, it's really exciting, all this space stuff, and maybe it's because I'm in computer science. I find it so fascinating. And being able to manage all of that data as effective and efficiently, I'm sure is really important. But let's talk a little bit about life before NetApp and talk about some of the challenges. So what were you using from an equipment standpoint prior to NetApp?
So our missions are all essentially separate projects. And so we have a lot of siloed legacy equipment that we have all over the place. And so as you can tell from our very, very old picture that I dug up, this is a lot of the stuff that we have replaced. They were from all different vendors, and some of these things were decent and when we first purchased or designed them, but they are well outlived their useful life. So one of the things we really wanted to focus on was the consolidation and to make this solution just easier to manage overall.
That makes absolutely sense. Makes a lot of sense. How is the performance in this environment?
So again, that was to varying degrees. Most of this that we replaced was slow spinning disk, which has its place, but not for your primary production environments or your database and VM needs. So we definitely needed something that was more performant, and the NetApp easily outpaced what we currently had.
Well, that makes sense, especially when you were discussing the missions and the uniqueness of the data that is collected. Can you share a little bit more around the unique data sets that you manage?
Yeah, so what we get off the spacecraft is essentially, raw telemetry files. So they're just flat files, but they're all unique. They're all, they don't tend to compress and dedupe well, but that's just the nature of the data. So that we take those data sets and, basically uncompress them and process them into, the different levels of data sets that are useful to the researchers so that they can then do their analysis and from there publish the scientific data that's, in journals all over the world.
Wow, that is fascinating. So you guys are also in journals all over the world, just really innovating and helping with technology. Um, what about the management of the environment? How did that work just to maintain it?
Yeah, that was another big challenge, is that having multiple storage vendors, multiple server vendors, most of these were not, appliances, in the fact that they had a file server front end on a, storage array. So that having a common platform was definitely one of our goals, to get rid of all of those, again, just to consolidate that down to where we had, one set of OSs to patch, one set of, firmware to maintain, because we have NASA security assessments and whatever, so that we really have to make sure that we're on point on our patch cycle.
I'm sure that kind of impacted the cost there as well, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely is costly to maintain from a hourly IT effort perspective. Having multiple OSs, multiple different vendors to deal with if you have an issue, it just takes more time, more effort.
So when you were experiencing all these challenges, is that when you guys reached out to Peak Resources?
Yes, we actually, as a part of our process, we put out a bid and essentially put out our requirements and what we were looking for. Did a little bit of a trade study, and we narrowed it down to Peak and NetApp, and they've been, a great partner ever since.
That's great to hear the word partner. That's what we really strive to be. And at that time, we received a call from our partners at Peak Resources asking to partner. Was really excited because I had heard about LASP and what you were doing with missions, very high level, and also wanted to visit the campus because the campus is really beautiful. And after having a couple of meetings, meeting your team and really understanding some of your challenges that we discussed briefly earlier, we came up with some solutions from a proposal standpoint. We immediately knew that you needed an all-flash system to be able to handle the performance and collect the data as it comes down from the satellites from each of the missions. But we also understood that once the data had been pulled down and now residing on an all-flash system, it didn't really require much performance or need much performance at that point. So we thought what makes sense is to automatically tier that code data off to a S3 type solution that could either be S3 in the cloud or S3 on-prem. And so our first proposal to you, we just was flash fast using FabricPool to storage grid. I've always been curious, and you've shared this with me, but what made you make the decision to go with storage grid S3 on-prem versus tiering to the cloud?
Yeah, for us, it was a few things. One, we wanted to essentially limit that latency, or those unknown factors of working out on the internet. A lot of our stuff is very mission critical, literally, so that they are they have SLAs and things that they have to meet. So having that on premises for our next tier of storage just made sense to us. As well as we like the idea of having that S3 on-prem and kind of building that private cloud out so that we can test and experiment and learn there. And then, we're taking some of these lessons learned and moving them to the public cloud. But it gave us that, kind of sandbox to play and learn in as well.
Well, it's really cool that you're able to have the storage on-prem. None of your requirements was really around protecting that data. In this case, having a backup of that data. And we also recommended using ONTAP features, SnapMirror for your disaster recovery, and then Snap Vaults as long-term backups. In addition to that, we thought it prudent to wrap all of that around professional services, shared professional services with NetApp and Peak Resources. And we positioned to perform your installation, configuration, and implementation. But you have a very talented team at LASP. What made you decide to go with professional services?
Yeah, for us, we had a lot of background in storage systems and other things, but there's, again, a couple of reasons we went that way. One, the NetApps are still fairly new, so we had some experience with them, but it's really nice to, learn from those professional services team. We utilize the NetApp training as well, but being partnered up with, one of the professionals who's coming out to either in person or virtually, you learn a lot from those professional services engagements. They're, these are the best practices. This is what I've been doing for, however long. And then also just having them come out, it really shaves that deployment time off. I have no doubt that we could have figured it out, but being able to have the system up and ready and completely functional and ready to cut over data sets to it quickly is just, worth that. It saves us the time on our part.
Definitely makes sense. When I was a customer, I always engaged professional services, and Peak Resources, one of my favorite VARs, because they have such a talented post-sales professional services team. They really understand technology. They really understand data center and being able to help customers implement their solutions. So glad you guys were able to take advantage of our shared professional services, as well as learning a little bit along the way. As we've talked about high level for your environment, Alex, can you walk us through the next few slides to really share as we do a closer look into the environment that you have?
Sure.
Well, I'll drive, but
all right. So
sounds good.
Yeah. And so this has also been a little bit of a slower growth, so that, our initial NetApp was the A200. One of the things that we really liked about the NetApp and the ONTAP platform is it allows us to scale out. So we started out with that initial A200 for some of our VM storage, and we got to really test it, get to learn the product, get to know the environment. And then as our next storage project came up, which was our, much bigger, we added the A300, and since we have also expanded to an additional A220 as the workload has just, increased and the data requirements have increased. But all of that is clustered together and then has the FabricPool backend to the storage grid cluster, where we have 9 storage grid nodes. That was part of that A300 expansion, but that enabled the auto tier to our on-prem storage grid cluster, which just gives us amazing amounts of savings from the amount of capacity that would have been in the SSD tier is automatically tiered after our cold data thresholds are met. So it's generally after 60 days, if this hasn't been accessed, it just automatically tiers over to the storage grid cluster.
That's really cool. And, from an auto tiering standpoint, that's tunable. And so for our audience who's watching today, know that while LASP, you guys are tiering your actual data, your code data over, there's other options within FabricPool where you can just tier your snapshots. As an example, say the performance is required for all of the data on, and you really just want to tier off the backups or your snapshots to your S3, you can absolutely do that. It's very flexible, and it really helps all customers to meet the needs for their business. I also like, Alex, that you shared some of your effective numbers. While our all flash fast systems provide a 3-to-1 guarantee, as you mentioned, Alex, some of your data sets are a little unique, and so that's where you're seeing these 2-to-1 effective numbers. But it's still really awesome that you have this 3-to-1 effective. I mean, does that help with not having to buy as much capacity for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have essentially, been able to oversubscribe, but in the proper way, the SSD, because both the auto tiering and the storage efficiencies, we are able to get, essentially a much more efficient use of the SSD. The hot data lives in the flash or the data that we want to pin there. And so we get the high performance and the high availability, And then on the stuff that, we've deemed as cold data sets, those still can be recalled if somebody needs to do processing on them or something, but they live in that much, much cheaper storage grid, spinning disks.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Because why would you want to keep cold data or data that doesn't need the performance on really expensive SSDs? But in addition, storage grid can serve multiple options. I see pictured and I know that you're also using it for direct S3 storage. Can you share a little bit with our audience on how you're utilizing object storage in that way?
Yeah, so we have it as the backup target for our on-premise backups, so that it's essentially just an S3 bucket on site, so that we don't have to have basically we don't have to wait for any latency or whatever. So if we needed to recover files, we can just replay them immediately and restore them. We also have it as just direct S3 buckets that we can provision for any of our internal or say like our web team uses.
That's really cool. So, it's not just a fit for purpose, it's a complete data fabric. So you have multiple uses for your storage grid and you can grow that with additional nodes as you need. Moving to the next slide.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of what I was talking about, so that we have 147 terabyte of raw SSD. So in that we have 169 terabytes of active SSD, but we're obviously not out of space. We still have quite a bit of room to grow in the SSD tier, and so that's because of the efficiencies. And then sorry,
We'll
the slide.
pause this.
Yeah.
So we'll start over. So Alex, now that we've talked about the environment, can you share a little bit more around the auto tiering with FabricPool?
Yeah, as we chatted about before, the SSD usage, we only have 147 TB of raw SSD in our cluster, but we have 169 terabytes active, and I mean we're obviously not out of space, so that's just because of the efficiencies are allowing us to oversubscribe the data. Then we also have the auto tiered data, so that if you're looking at our active IQ reporting or whatever, we have tiered off over 56 terabytes of data that is already in the cold storage, and then we have another 49-ish terabytes that we could potentially, but that does include stuff that we don't want to tier in the report, so that we can pick and choose the data set, so that we can pin our databases into the all flash, because we know that it will need the performance, but yet the NAS data, CIFS, and NFS data can auto tier, and basically if somebody needs to access it, it's still available, it's still mounted, but it's just in that cheaper tier for us.
That's really cool. And as you mentioned, Active IQ is a great included free tool that you get when you own a NetApp system. In fact, these graphs were pulled straight from Active IQ. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Alex, but how easy do you think it is to find information within Active IQ for your environment?
Yeah, it's really simple. Once you've added your all your systems to Active IQ, it just comes default. So that looking around and the reporting in there is great. It lets you see stuff, growth patterns, usage, and really pin down if something needs to be moved around. One of your nodes is really hot because it has 2 or 3 things heading at you. It allows you to really be flexible, and you can notify on it. You can just monitor. It's a great tool.
Yeah, I used it when I was a customer, and I definitely see it as an FC being very beneficial to all of our customers to just get a quick view of your environment. Moving on, you discussed how NetApp was RFP. Why was NetApp selected?
Yeah, so we've had several things that we were looking for when we were going for.
So Alex, after the RFP was out and we responded, why was NetApp and Peak Resources selected?
So there were a few things that we were looking for in our storage solution. Auto tiering was a big thing for us. We didn't want to have to try to manage what data lived in what pool manually. We just wanted something that on the back end would, either through usage or performance or something. And the NetApp auto tiering with FabricPool was a great fit for us. Another was the scale out architecture. We mentioned it before, but the ability to grow by nodes in our NetApp cluster, so that if we need more performance or more capacity or whatever, and then just plug that into our cluster on the all flash side or on the storage grid side, that's just makes life a lot easier for us because we're still on that consistent platform.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The other was, again, with all the other things that you're rolling up, the total cost of ownership, it was just trying to, LASP operates, we don't care about profits, we care about producing good science, but we still have to be cost effective. And what we're, these are all, projects and grants and missions that are, they're not, we have to be very financially, smart. So reducing costs and making really efficient decisions are a big part of what we do. And the NetApp solution, especially with the auto tiering and the other stuff that's built in, the different free tools, really help us to be that efficient.
Yeah, the power of ONTAP is what I like to call it.
Yes. The other thing was essentially we've, in this instance, built our own private cloud. We do some stuff that is covered under export control, so that some of the public cloud options don't work well for us from a compliance standpoint, so that we have to be very cognizant of what data sets live where. The public data obviously can be in the public cloud, but we have other data sets that are covered and controlled. So having the ability to control what data lives where is really important to us. And then the last one is that ease of management, having a consolidated platform, having ONTAP and just across the board help make our life easier, from our security, vulnerability patching, to just the management and the time that the IT staff has to spend on these systems. It's just really important for us to have that common platform, and ONTAP definitely delivers there.
Well, it's definitely a future-proof design for you. So I know that there may be some requirements that doesn't allow you to take full advantage of the cloud, but if a project comes or a new mission comes and the requirements are for the cloud, your environment is already future-proof to allow you to expand as well. So just another added benefit of NetApp. So let's talk a little bit more about the storage savings. I'm always a big fan of storage savings because as a previous customer and as an SC, talking to my customers like you, it's really interesting to find out around your savings.
So yeah, again, the auto tiering, you understand what, the promise, but you don't actually see the proof's in the pudding. You don't know what's going to be there, how your data is going to look until you get there. And now that we've got several, of our storage arrays that we've retired over here, we now see that 40 to 50% of our NAS data will auto tier in that cold data set. It just allows the SSD performance, but at the lower cost. It allows the researchers to still do, it doesn't operate any differently for them. They don't care what tier it is. It's just in the tier that it needs to be for them. And then we also have another project that we're currently working on that we're going to move another 50 terabytes onto the same cluster that was referenced earlier. And out of that, again, it's the same data types. So we're expecting to hold that essentially that 40 to 50% for our NAS data. So overall, it's been a great savings for us to be in the lower tier but still have that higher performance.
Absolutely, definitely makes sense. And then what about from your consolidated platform?
Yeah, this is all about reducing that IT, labor. We have the same number of people, but we're very, very busy, and we don't have time to get the things, done that we're, are promising to do in the first place. So that's always that balance or struggle. But we've retired, 6 storage arrays from various vendors, retired a lot of these older uh, server-based servers, file-based systems. But the management of those really took a lot of time and effort by our staff to be able to patch and maintain all these different, Windows, Linux, Solaris. Those are all great platforms, but having all of them at once is a challenge. So
Right,
uh,
right.
we've also consolidated and transitioned away from Fiber Channel to iSCSI. That just, again, gave us a common platform. We didn't have to then manage the Fiber Channel switches and that infrastructure. Again, it's a great platform, which is we really wanted to go in the direction of iSCSI because, again, it helps us to, we're already going to have the top of rack switches, and now that everything's 10 and 25 gigabit, we have plenty of throughput there. So why not move and transition away?
Absolutely. Easy management really makes sense, and it goes along with helping for your savings as well from a cost standpoint, as well as from, just really auto tiering is saving as well. Um, all of this data is really easy to find. I know that we mentioned Active IQ, but you're also taking in Cloud Insights that has this information end-to-end performance data that you can capture as well. And I just wanted to mention that to our audience because most of the information was really quick to find. Alex and I just went through, and primarily Alex went through their Active IQ to provide these detailed information around their savings as well as their environment. So thank you for sharing those details with us, Alex, today. So what's next for LASP? I know that we've talked about growing your environment. Where do you see that going?
So yeah, one of the more challenging aspects is that we don't know what projects or missions we're going to necessarily win. So we have to be very, very flexible so that, tomorrow somebody may walk in the door and say, I'm proposing something that's going to need a petabyte of storage, and I'll know in a year or two whether they really need that or not if they win. So we have to be able to grow dynamically, but we don't want to be, again, that cost efficiency, we don't want to be too large. So it's trying to hit that sweet spot in the middle where we can quickly grow and adapt based on their needs, but yet, not be too big or not be too expensive.
Definitely makes sense. And I know that we discussed earlier on around flex group with FabricPool. And just for our audience, a flex group is a very large volume that can span up to petabytes. And it's really great for really small files. And it's recently been announced in one of our later releases of ONTAP to be supported with FabricPool. And so Alex and I, we've talked about this in the past. Alex, and that was prior to Flex Group being supported. Now that it's supported with FabricPool, do you think this is something LASP will consider?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been using FlexVols forever now, and flex groups just seem like a kind of a natural growth or extension of that. Your example of the large data sets with lots of tiny files is a perfect use case for us. So we haven't deployed them yet, but that's something that's definitely on our roadmap to deploy.
Well, I'll definitely be ready and willing to help with you for that transition into flex groups. Another new solution that we introduced was auto tiering to fast. Now, Alex, I know you guys have fast systems that you use for other purposes within LASP. Would you consider auto tiering a FabricPool to a fast system?
Yeah, absolutely. Like for us, we've kind of considered ours. We have the all flash, and then we have the fast systems. So right now they're kind of independent, but they could easily be that middle tier for us, and that they're probably slightly more performant than the storage grid, But depending on the special use cases, we also we could also go almost the opposite direction of the groups that have chosen to go with the flash. If they all of a sudden need more performance, then we could then, set it up the opposite way where we're essentially fronting them with a little bit of SSD on from our cluster. So it's just nice to have options and to be able to grow however we need to.
It's so great. And that's really where the last data fabric comes into play, is being able to move your data around as you need it and to benefit the researchers as well as the missions. Something else that LASP is doing, and I think is going to move into the future, are containers. Can you share a little bit with our audience what you guys are doing with containers? It's really cool.
Yeah, our data systems and our web teams are both actively using containers in production. So one of the useful things for us is that we're able to use Trident, which is an API that NetApp provides with ONTAP essentially, that allows containers to directly provision storage. So we have given them their own SVMs so that they can manage their own volumes, and basically they only need to contact us if they need help with something or troubleshooting or something, but it's not a day-to-day. It saved us a lot of work effort and a lot of time on them waiting for us to fulfill a ticket to provision a volume when they can just automatically spin those up, but yet they're still kind of sandboxed, and they can't harm any of our production, but they're can do whatever they need to do to solve their problem.
I mean, it's really self-service, right? It's freeing up your time to focus on more important projects that are coming down. And the value of having a free API such as Trident, which we offer for your persistent storage, is really a huge benefit in my eyes. And it sounds like that's what's happening at LASP as well. And speaking on that new forward-thinking containers, what about Ansible from an automation standpoint? Have you guys looked at Ansible? I know you guys have, but can you share with our audience?
Yeah, so we use Ansible for the majority of our configuration management on the Unix Linux side. So it's kind of a natural extension. So we are definitely investigating, and we appreciate the fact that you guys are putting out playbooks to give us examples to work from, so that we're actively looking at that, and that will be something that we're going to want to roll out pretty soon.
That's really cool. I think now we're up to a couple of hundred different NetApp playbooks for Ansible. You can find out more about that. And I'm sure there's some additional sessions during Insight around Ansible, but that's really cool to hear where you're taking advantage of that automation. And just some examples of the Ansible playbooks are things like creating volumes, creating new aggregates. Those are already step-by-step in a playbook. And so it just really makes your life of managing your data just that much easier to do: fast, simple, and reliable. And we talked about the cloud a little bit, and I know that you guys are utilizing the cloud. I'm sure that that's going to expand. Can you share a little bit about how you're going to take advantage of the cloud in the future?
Yeah, for our public data sets, so we call them science data centers, but for our missions, that's where they publish their public data. So those are already actively moving into the cloud. So they're already there. We have other groups that are well, still ways back from migrating to the cloud or being able to even understand it, whether it's useful for them. So we're kind of all across the board, but we're actively in most of the major cloud vendors. We are, that's one of our challenges actually, is that since we're, academic and we have researchers, they can kind of pick and choose whatever they want to use as a resource. So having something in the middle that can kind of manage all those different clouds is very, or at least report on our usage, is very, very useful to us. But yeah, we're also actively looking in the GovCloud options for our, off-prem backups or any of those other things. So we are actively using the cloud. It's just we have to pick and choose our spots where it's useful and cost effective for us.
Sure, and we absolutely understand that, and we definitely partner with a lot of the hyperscalers that are out there. today. And so as you continue your journey with the cloud, we'll be right there to support you as you move forward and make those decisions. Some final thoughts. You know, Alex and I have spent some time really going over LASP environment. And so I want you to, and this is to our audience, to think, is this something that your company could use? But you may be wondering, well, I don't know how much savings I can get out of this. But we have an easy, free tool to find your potential savings. It's called the Inactive Data Reporting Tool. It's within System Manager. So if you already own a NetApp system, you can see TR 4598, and it will walk you through how you can find your inactive data to know how much data is actually cold. Some additional technical reports is TR 4826, which is specifically for NetApp FabricPool with Storage Grid, and TR 4598 again is the FabricPool best practices. If you have any additional questions or you want to find out more about FabricPool with Storage Grid or any other topic that we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed below, or you can reach out to your SE for more technical information. With that, Alex, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I really enjoyed being able to present with you, and I look forward to us hopefully presenting in the future. But if not presenting in the future, definitely working together to help with your environment and management.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thanks again. And for all the attendees, please remember to complete your survey. Our session is BRK 1044-2. Enjoy the rest of your time at our virtual Insight. Thanks.